How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 110 of VR Roundtable. I'm Chris. I'll be your host this week, and I'm joined by the usual three guys, Gary, Steve, and Anthony. I'll jump over to Gary. How are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Okay. Just a normal week, really. Played a little bit of VR, not too much, really. It's still a little bit busy at work, but I did pick up some of these things. I don't know if you've seen these. You know, the like cable management basically for VR headsets. So I saw a post on, it might have been our Vive or one of the subreddits anyway, and they were talking about how these can sort of make it better to almost like a wireless experience with VR headsets. So I picked up a batch of these. You get 6 in the batch, and I've been experimenting with these a little bit. Now, I've always had a hook on my wall in order to keep the cable off the floor. I never liked it where I had like the cable running along the floor or anything like that. And these are just sort of a slight enhancement to that. So they're a retractable cord that keeps the cable out of the way. They work pretty well, but they do require a little bit of experimentation in order to get it in the right places on your ceiling. And also, I've got quite a low ceiling in here, which I don't think I'll get the full benefit of them. I think if you had a higher ceiling, you get more of a benefit. But I have got them one placed above my head, so I can, like, if I'm playing seated experiences and that kind of stuff, it helps out for that, and it does make it more or less like it feels pretty much wireless now when I'm playing seated experiences. Just wanted to do a quick explanation of why I've got these things hanging from a ceiling. I don't know if you can see them or not. Probably not.
That's super awesome. I want to get some of those, but you convinced me.
Yeah, it's worth looking into. I will say, you know, it's not revolutionary or anything like that, and they do require a little bit of experimentation to get the right positions on your ceiling. But I think, you know, for the price, it's worth jumping in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Steve, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. Hopefully I got the streaming issues under key. We're not dropping frames today, so I never found anything wrong, so we'll just chalk it up to a random internet YouTube server type issue, because I didn't do anything to fix it. So I'm glad that's in good shape. And other than that, you know, played a couple games this week, and an old game, one that we're going to talk about later, that you know, we've never really delved into, and I'm enjoying that. I actually played that game the most, and that's Elite Dangerous, but more on that later.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And then how are you, Anthony? How are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Same old, pretty much. I am on Patreon now. That's
nice.
A sidebar thing. It's for VR 365 and VR game rankings. Yeah, I mean, for years, people have been like, hey, don't you have a Patreon? Don't you have a Patreon? And I never did it for the longest time. Part of it was like a tax thing. I didn't want to worry about like taxes and stuff. But yeah, finally did it. So I'm out there, Patreon/VR365, I believe.
That's awesome. That's cool. I have to look at it after the show. This week I've been working on my first VR game with a group of 4 other guys, and developing for VR is way harder than we thought it would be, so that's good to know. We're trying to make like a snowball, snow fort prototype game, and you're able to form a snowball with snow, and then you're able to throw a snowball, or like combine snowballs to make a bigger snowball. But like that's all we got working. The stuff isn't working too well. So,
what are you developing that in, Chris? Is it Unity or
Yeah, we're just working in Unity, and you know, man, the SDK stuff is pretty finicky. Everything is kind of a little bit hard. I don't know how these developers do it. I guess we just got to get more experience in it, but it's fun. It's fun to learn. And then next week, we're probably going to do like a haunted house. One person's on the computer screen, like designing the haunted house, and then one person's in VR, like going through the haunted house. That could be cool too. So, you know, we're trying.
Yeah, let us know. You can send us a copy when you've got something working. Yeah, that'd be great.
I could send you the snowball throwing prototype. I'll do that after the show. Anyway, that's what I've been up to this week. So we'll just jump into the news. We got a few news stories, actually quite a bit of news this week. And, you know, that topic, Elite Dangerous, as was mentioned earlier. And then we have a few games that came out this week as well. All right, so jumping into it, there's a GDC survey that comes out every year that surveys developers on different statistics and things. And it's just interesting, I think, to look at this every year and compare to previous years and things like that. So this one was kind of interesting for me. I wasn't expecting this, but 33% of VR developers are working on the Vive primarily. That's what they're currently developing for. And then 30% for Rift. So I guess that's not that big of a gap. Like it sounds like, ooh, Vive is like way ahead, but they're kind of very, very similar there. And then something that I thought was the coolest out of this was that 21% of developers are developing something for Oculus Quest, which is exciting because I'm really excited for Oculus Quest. And I guess the weirdest thing for me is that like 42% are developing for other. So there's got to be something coming out. Like, maybe we'll mention the Valve HMD later, but like some developers are developing for something that hasn't been released yet. So I think that's pretty cool. I can jump it over to Steve first if you want to talk about this.
Sure. The things that obviously the 21% for the Quest stands out, as you mentioned, but something that stands out to me is PlayStation VR at only 13%. We know that represents 75% of the sort of the big hitter VR headsets, being the PC VR tethered headsets and the PlayStation VR, not counting the mobile headset. So it fall into 13. It makes me wonder if that in some ways the type of people at GDC, a game, we'll use Astrobot as an example. Astrobot maybe have how many developers working on that team? I don't know. Let's say 50. But would all 50 go to GDC and participate in this survey? Likely not. Maybe only one. So the small team versus large team disparity may be showing its head there, because 13% definitely seems too low for the value of what that PlayStation VR platform brings. Everything else, it looks like HTC Vive is sort of hold and serve over previous years. Oculus itself has fallen. Oculus Rift specifically, I mean. And some of that may be, people that were working on a Rift game last year are working on a Quest game this year, something like that. So, I just think this is interesting stuff. And those are the things that stood out to me, really. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's interesting. Gary, what do you think?
Well, I was just looking at these. I think because I think a lot of these results, because if these... You've got a survey being handed out to developers, and I think there's a lot of interpretation that goes along with this as well. So you've got HTC Vive, 33%, but then you've got Oculus Rift. Now, I don't know whether some developers will possibly interpret the HTC Vive question or the box that they have to tick as being Steam VR. And if that's the case, then we know that could be potentially other headsets as well. I don't know exactly how this was phrased or how they answered all these developers. And there's obviously a lot of crossover on this as well. So developers that are making titles for the HTC Vive on this survey could potentially also be listed down the Oculus Rift as well. So there's a lot of crossover with this. And I agree with Steve. I think the most surprising thing for me is the PlayStation VR, 13%. That seems really low, especially in comparison, which actually I think is quite encouraging for the Oculus Quest, the fact that 21% are developing for the Oculus Quest. So that seems really strange to me when we know that the PlayStation VR has such a large install base. You would assume that anybody developing something for Steam VR, HTC Vive, Oculus, that had the ability to transfer that over to the PlayStation VR, then maybe they would do that. So that seems really low. And as I say before, I think the point I wanted to lead with is the fact that a lot of these developers are working on numerous platforms at the same time, developing one title, and they will release it on numerous platforms. That makes the PlayStation VR 13% even more strange to me. But yeah,
it must be like, I've been to conferences like this, and there's always just a bunch of indies who are like just starting out, and they're like, they probably kind of skew the survey a little bit, but I think it's still really low, even considering all those things. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have pretty much covered everything as far as this goes. You'll notice, of course, that the percentages go way over 100% total. So, and that's what Gary was speaking to there, is a lot of these developers are working on like 3 or 4 of these platforms simultaneously. So it kind of, the numbers, I mean, I was just surprised by you guys. PlayStation VR, it doesn't make a ton of sense, especially like we just recently heard from the CEO of Fast Travel Games. And I don't know if we have it as one of our news stories here, but I don't think, do we have a super data story coming up?
I don't think
About
so.
700,000 PlayStation. Okay. Yeah, there's another story where 700,000 or Super Data is estimating that PlayStation sold 700,000 units in the fourth quarter, and that Fast Travel Games CEO was saying they had an explosion of sales, most just in like December, and that PlayStation is making up, I believe, 58% of their sales. And you hear a story like that, and you think every developer and their mama's cousin is going to try to bring their games over to PlayStation VR. And if you look at like all the best VR games that are out there, most of them have come to PlayStation VR. Arizona Sunshine, Raw Data, and if they haven't come, they're on their way. Like The Mage's Tale, Zing: The Land Beyond. All these games are coming. Space Pirate Trainer just came there, and so that's a weird number. And then of course the other 42%. I mean, obviously we all are hoping that it's something incredible that everybody's working on, like Samsung with this, whatever they might have, and all these things.
Yeah.
Crunchy, just quickly, Crunchy did mention in chat, maybe other is PSVR 2. That's an interesting thought, because it does seem low. I don't know why it's only 13% of developers, but you would maybe think that if they were asked this question, you're developing for PlayStation VR, they would include PlayStation VR 2 in that if they were going to do that. But
So.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, hey, it's always cool that GDC does those surveys. So I think it's cool that we get a little bit of knowledge from the industry from that. All right, moving on to the next story is at Intel Realsense camera. There's potentially an Intel Realsense camera for positional tracking for 3 degrees of freedom headsets, kind of any headset that doesn't have this positional tracking, and it's going to be $199, which I don't think is a terrible asking price for it. It's basically previous Intel Realsense stuff. Used kind of these low field of view cameras that didn't use SLAM. They used like depth sensing and things like that. SLAM is the way that 6 degrees of freedom inside out tracking solutions kind of sense the world. So this is basically like a package that just has 2 like high field of view cameras that can do SLAM and can do positional tracking in that way. I don't think it's specifically designed for VR per se, but I could totally work with it. So it's just kind of cool that Intel's coming out with this kind of as like a dev kit for if people want to add this stuff. Intel's Realsense technology has always been pretty interesting to me. I guess I could go over to Anthony first. What do you think about this tiny little positional tracking camera?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't reported on this story since it's come out, and really pretty much because I just don't know, like, what is the use case scenario for here. Like, a lot of people are saying, well, you could connect it to your Oculus Go, but if you're gonna do that, just buy a Quest, you know what I mean? Or like, I don't really kind of get it, but I guess for like developers and stuff, or if you're having like, maybe you have an arcade setup and you need to add like external tracking, and you're trying, or maybe you have a company and you have some special little homebrew type of thing that you're working with, and you have a bunch of Oculus Go's, and you can buy this and snap this on there, and then you can show off some type of little VR thing that would go along with it. But I don't know how this really relates to us so much in terms of the VR world.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it definitely seems like, it could be for developers or for people who bought way too many Oculus Go's and need to retrofit these things because the Quest is coming out. But yeah, I mean, if you buy a Go and this, like, just buy a Quest. Come on. Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree as well. I will say, I think that there gets to a point now where we're seeing the development of VR and we know where it's going in some respects. And I think 3 degrees of freedom is going to go away. I think it was interesting. And the Oculus Go it's a great device. But at the same time, I think it's clear to see that from, at least late this year, early next year, there will be very few 3 degrees of freedom headsets being released, and I think 6DOF is the way it will be going anyway. So this is sort of a way to adapt certain headsets. I don't know how, like, the longevity of it, how long this device will really be out there to help headsets that are currently out there, but it's interesting nonetheless, and I think it just points to the fact more than anything that 6 degrees of freedom is the way that everybody really wants to enjoy VR.
Yeah, and Steve, what do you think?
I think from the consumer perspective, I believe Anthony is correct. It doesn't make sense to buy a Go plus this, but what I think, if you think of how Intel operates, they sell direct to consumers, like, if to gaming people building a PC, they'll sell them, you can buy your latest i7 or i9 processor. They make some storage stuff, they make network cards, but a lot of what they do is also to partners and OEMs. And I look at this as sort of the springboard to that, in that if I'm going to make, like, I'll use Pimax as an example, right? Pimax is a small company, and let's say they wanted to release a inside-out tracking headset. Instead of developing their own inside-out tracking or licensing it from Microsoft via the spec Windows MR platform, they could buy the Intel Realsense. It's a platform. It's ready to drop in. You just plop this bad boy into your headset clamshell, and you now have Intel's well-supported inside-out tracking capability. So I almost look for thinking and speculating, and to be clear, I don't know any of this, but I'm looking at it as sort of a commercial release, but also sort of a simultaneous springboard into them maybe partnering with lots of VR headset OEMs who really, we don't need everyone to develop inside-out tracking. Like, if there's an off-the-shelf component and set of tools that Gary's headset company, when he makes one 10 years from now, you just partner with Intel and grab it. You don't have to, everyone doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, someone already did it, let's use what they've done and let's evolve. So I look at it in that tone. Again, I could be completely wrong, and that might not be what Intel is intending, but that's the way I see it at this moment.
Yeah, it looks like Intel's really trying to get some support from these other companies, and future headsets or something, kind of trying to get their Realsense technology in there, because they've been developing this stuff forever, and they've always been showing all these use cases, but I think VR is really the most promising use case for that. Thanks to John Bartow for the donation, as well as Tony M. They both gave us some super chats, so thank you guys for that. All right, the next, we're going to get on to some kind of smaller news topics. I don't really know how much there's to say about some of these, but the first one is just that Google made a patent for foveated compression. So this basically means, there's foveated rendering, and then you compress the image just to kind of save on some power consumption and to save on GPU power, basically. So Google tried to patent that. I don't think you can really patent that idea. I think that idea is kind of public knowledge, to be honest. But either way, it points towards everybody kind of using compression algorithms to reduce GPU requirements and eventually get VR cheaper, which I think is always a good thing. Does anyone have anything they want to say about this?
Not too much, other than the fact I think it's interesting to include a news story like this in there. There's not a lot to say, but I think from as a consumer, when we look at all of these news stories and we see a general direction, I think it's interesting to see a general direction that all of these big companies seem to be heading in. So we know the areas that they're concentrating on. So foveated rendering is a big deal. We know that they're concentrating on that kind of stuff, but also compression is a big deal as well, for various areas. One of them obviously being wireless sort of rendering as well. But I think just looking at all of these little things, all of these very small news stories that sometimes come out, it's interesting to see a general consensus of where these large companies are going. And I think it gives us like some kind of insight into the future of where we could potentially end up. It's not necessarily the future we possibly thought it would be 2 years ago, 3 years ago when we first got into VR. But they're concentrated on certain parts. And it's interesting for that, if nothing else. So with this particular thing, there's not a lot to say. I think, I think you're right, Chris, honestly. But it's interesting nonetheless.
You know what? The project lead on this was Dr. Behnam Bastani, who led Google's entire VR rendering thing. Well, in 2018, because like this patent was filed back in 2017. In 2018, he got poached by Facebook, and he's working in their Facebook reality labs with Michael Abrash. Of course, both of them have been moved over to Facebook's augmented reality labs. Nah, just kidding. I don't know what's exactly going on over there. But yeah, Facebook is poaching a lot of the best talent out there. They continue to do that.
Yeah, they really are. Thank you, Dell, for the donation as well. I'm getting a lot of donations today. It's crazy.
Oh, you know what? Dell Wolfensparger in chat, he also asked a question along with his donation. What do you think sales numbers will be for Oculus Quest? And going back to that super data story where they were talking about 700,000 PlayStation VRs in the fourth quarter, they are estimating 1.3 million Oculus Quests will be sold in 2019. That's their estimation, 1.3 million. And that would be awesome. That would be super awesome.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I don't know what, just on that, because I don't know if anybody's got anything else they want to add on to that, but that is an interesting point. The like 1 point, what did the Oculus Go sell? Do we know sort of sales numbers for the Oculus Go? I think it's sort of 1 million, is it? Is somebody's, I've heard that figure bandied around somewhere.
Well, you know, Super Data again, Super Data, they're kind of pulling these numbers out of thin air. So we got to remember that. But in the fourth quarter period, I believe they had the Oculus Go selling like 500,000 in the fourth quarter, because I think they had PSVR was like 700,000 in the fourth quarter. I think Oculus Go was like 555,000, and then like Oculus Rift was like 160,000, and Vive was like 140,000. You know, somewhere in that neighborhood. So if you extrapolate that out, Oculus Go has to be, I would think, over 1 million grand total by now, at least. I just wonder, I don't know why Oculus hasn't like made a statement about it though.
Yeah, like as of September 2018, there was an estimation that there were over 1 million sold. So I think that's, you know, probably in the ballpark. I hope Quest does really well. Like I want Quest to do amazing. I want Quest to sell. You think so?
Yeah, I think the if you look at the Go, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who bought the Go and didn't really know what they were getting into and were very impressed by it. But if I look at the Go here now, coming on, was it 9-10 months later? There's tons of games out there because you have the whole Gear VR market and all that, but there hasn't been a lot of focus on it on Oculus's standpoint in terms of getting games out there. Like it really feels mobile, whereas the Quest has an opportunity to bridge the gap somewhat and not feel as mobile. It has the opportunity to get these deeper games. So I think a lot of the people that maybe bought a Go, setting us enthusiasts aside, but more of a general consumer that bought a Go that takes the plunge onto a Quest will get more use out of it, will get more life out of it, because the scope of the games are, I think, going to be deeper. And I know it runs contrary to my opinion of the scope of what the Quest is going to do as a whole, but I think compared to the Go, I think the Quest is going to be a deeper experience, not just because of the 6 degrees of freedom, of course, but I think the games will be a little deeper, and I think that'll go a long way into it not falling off. To me, I just feel like, and I don't know because Oculus hasn't given us numbers, but I feel like the Go has lost a lot of momentum, in part because they announced the Quest, I'm sure, but it just feels like the momentum is lost on the Go, and I think the Quest will pick it up.
It's lost. I agree. I think it's lost though, partly because they've just not supported it in terms of like first-party software or even developers. There's some great titles out there for the Oculus Go. Don't get me wrong, but they've not supported it in the way I expected them to. I expected them to do far more than they have done. Rather than just having this back catalogue, this library of Gear VR games that they've transported over to the Oculus Go, I expected them to push it much more than they have. because I expected like a response from them like they did with the Oculus Rift, where they put money into first-party titles, Oculus Studio titles and things like this, which they simply haven't done with the Oculus Go, and it's a disappointment. Overall, I will say, I think overall that the Oculus Go is a great device, and I stand by my initial impressions of it, that I think it's a great device, but overall I've been a little bit disappointed with the amount of support they've done. I remember going back to a show that we did last year just before OC5, and we sort of briefly went through our wishes for what we would have appear, and one of mine was more titles, more in-depth significant titles for the Oculus Go, and we didn't get that, and I don't think we are going to get that now, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really sad. Like all my, two of my friends got Oculus Go's, and like we barely play together anymore. Like we were all hyped about it. We're like, man, I hope a bunch of games get announced, and then it's like Monopoly's coming out maybe. It's like that's about it. But
it's still a wonderful thing to take on trips. If you're going on vacation somewhere, the Oculus Go is a beautiful thing to bring along with you.
Oh yeah, I think we all know once Quest comes out, like there's no real reason to get a Go. Like the price difference, just go for a Quest and you'll get infinitely more use out of it. But hey, it was cool, and it still is cool. I agree though. I wish it had some more support behind it. I guess moving on to the next story revolving around Facebook is that they. It's a lot of patent stories today, it seems like. But Facebook patented a small form factor AR display with a large field of view, which, obviously patents don't really always say how they do it, but it just basically they have a few configs in their patent. So the HoloLens is like 30 degrees by 17.5 degrees. The Magic Leap one is 40 degrees by 30 degrees. The configs outlined in this patent are 52 by 30 degrees and 65 by 30.5 degrees. So they're a little bit bigger. This isn't dramatically more field of view, this isn't like a double field of view or something like that. But I think it does point to the fact that, like we discussed last week or maybe a few weeks ago, that Facebook is probably looking at all this AR stuff going on, and they're like, man, we gotta start releasing something, or getting some the gears going on some product or something, because they're probably losing out on some market share. So I think if they came out with a product with more field of view like this, it would probably be something that people would want to buy in the space. So yeah, Anthony, do you have anything you want to say about this?
Well, I mean, this story, it kind of piggybacks off of some of the other stories that we've heard about Facebook and AR. Business Insider, of course, they had that story a couple weeks back where supposedly literally hundreds of employees that were in Facebook Reality Labs have moved into basically like a new building that appears to be an AR focus. And also somebody, I don't know if it was at Business Insider or another outlet, they actually tried this prototype, and they said that the prototype was very lightweight. It was small, but it wasn't so lightweight that if you sat on it, you would just smash it. But it's very lightweight, kind of bendable, flexible a little bit, and it had a pretty good field of view. So that kind of goes into maybe the 72-degree diagonal version of this. So we're hearing, there's a lot of little whispers that are going on in the background. The question is, like, when would we actually find out about this thing? And with Quest so soon, we're approaching February right now. Quest could be the final day of April or very early in May. And with that, I don't think I don't think they bring this AR headset to GDC. Because I mean, a lot of people are like, well, it's not confusing. These are separate products. There's a million separate products. And there's millions of products out there. But I go back to like the uneducated consumers out there, uneducated from this whole VR AR world, where they cover this stuff, but they watch it from afar. And if all of a sudden they hear this big news story about Oculus augmented reality headset, they're like, wait a minute, I just bought an Oculus Rift. What's going on here? I mean, there's people out there like that. I don't think they want to confuse it too much. So we might be waiting a while before we actually see this thing, like maybe summer or something.
We touched on this last week, but if you remember, like the very first thing Zuckerberg did was show the platform, show the different products. Like without rehashing too much last week, I do think I think they'll show it. I think they'll show their cards to an extent. I think they'll mention AR. I don't think they're going to show a device. Like we would be seeing more of a device if they had a device imminent. You know, even the Quest, like we basically knew what the thing looked like and knew a lot of what it was going to be before they formally announced it. And we're not there with this AR headset. We don't have anything other than this patent graphic that we're showing here. So I don't think anything's imminent, but I do think, and Zuckerberg made that very clear at the last keynote, that they will show their product lineup, and they'll say, here's Rift, here's Quest, here's Go, and they'll talk about it in a bigger breath. That's happened already, and I think that'll continue to happen. And I think that's important because I think consumers today, they want a product lineup. They want their watch and their smartphone and their tablet and their computer. Like those are all things that need to play together. And I think AR and VR are going to need to play together as well in some way. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I am not interested. For the same reason I don't have an Android phone and a Apple tablet. Like I'm not interested in a broken unified platform or lack of a unified platform. And I think one of the key things that me as a consumer will be looking at, and I'm not speaking from the VR enthusiast Steve, I'm just speaking from the general Steve, because I do this with a lot of other products that I buy. I'm looking for integration and platform unification, in that I know that when I buy a replacement tablet, all my software is going to fold in with it and it's going to play nice. Or when I buy speakers, whole home audio for the house, like Amazon Echoes and stuff, like I'm looking for how everything plugs together and plays together, because integration is just as important as the quality of any one specific product. And I think Facebook gets that, and I think they're going to push that wide platform angle, because that's how they get you hooked. They get you hooked on one device, and next thing you know, you're buying devices that link specifically to that device, and that keeps you vested in their ecosphere.
One of the problems, though, about having like a family of products is a couple products, like they have this whole family, right? But they have their favored children, and a couple of them get kicked to the curb. We were just talking about the Oculus Go. It almost like Facebook has the Quest, the Go, and the Rift, right? And it seems like the odd man out is the Go. Like they're not doing anything with the Go. Now they're going to bring an AR product as well. They're going to do it, but they're not releasing this year, so there's no reason that they need to like stress out on this. But at some point, they will introduce this.
This is a long way away, I think, and we have all these news stories of these patents that are coming out, and constantly. I think there's very few weeks that there aren't new patents revealed that have been sort of undisclosed, and we can talk about them. Sometimes we don't even include them in the show because they're so these companies just make patents. They file patents all the time. This patent is probably a year old, at least a year old. It's just now it's sort of got approved and we can see it. This is nothing that's coming out this year. This is probably just something they have planned. They want to secure themselves for the future. We all know that Facebook will be working on some kind of AR headset at some point in the future, but this is nothing. I don't think it's anything this year or next year possibly. But I think just looking at these patents, looking at the direction that the industry is going is interesting nevertheless.
Yeah, it's always cool to be able to get that window into these companies, no matter how we can do it. And it seems like there's just a patent a day nowadays. But hey, it just points to the direction that we know that's happening. Eventually, there'll be some sort of AR product from Facebook, probably.
Seacoast Life says the Go is a transition product meant to be replaced fairly soon, and I agree with that. It does seem like the Go was like the first hit of heroin that's given for free. I mean, it wasn't a free device, but it was like it was a very cheap way to get people that first hit, and I think they're hoping that their repeat buyers are stemming from that, and there may be some truth in it. I thought that was an interesting point.
Do you guys think it would be a good idea, like if they could get the Go to $99, should it be a product that they still hold on to? Or because like Airman 929565 much earlier in chat said that he wonders if the Go is actually like a net negative because people get the Go. And I mean, we probably shouldn't go back into Go talk, but I'm just wondering, like, if they had it at $99, can you understand the Go at $99? Because you're like, yeah, that's that's almost like cardboard back in the day. You get it for $99 and it's like it's like my kid's first VR headset, so it could be good in that price range.
Yeah, I think, there's got to be room for the Go going forward as long as they make it cheaper. It sounds like they have been getting it cheaper. I've seen sales down to like there was a sale for $149, I think, for a day or so. So that'd be a way to keep it around a little longer, and hopefully they did a Gen 2 of it. If they did a Gen 2 of the Go, maybe it would have to have 6 degrees of freedom, and then that'd confuse things. So who knows what's going to happen. But speaking of all these HMDs, just a quick little news story that's kind of interesting is Cloudhead Games tweeted out a picture a few days ago, and basically the cast and the shadow cast by the image kind of shows the Valve HMD. Like it's easy to compare geometry on these images and notice that, yeah, this is probably the Valve HMD that they're testing a game on or something. So that's pretty cool. The tweet was then removed by Cloudhead, and they made a new tweet saying that they have various hardware in their studio that's not yet fit for public consumption, kind of alluding to the fact that it's probably the Valve HMD. So this is exciting news for me because I want this thing to exist, and there hasn't been too much confirmation that anyone had it other than those leaked images. So this is kind of not really 100% confirmation, but it's pretty close, as close as we'd get to that. Steve, what do you think about that?
So our buddy Paradise Decay keyed me in on this. I had totally missed this news this week. Because and to our next story that we'll talk about, but there's a reason why a lot of Vive news is kind of being filtered out, and if you're a member of the community, you can't necessarily get to the news. But this is interesting. Like it is not an absolute confirmation. It's very plausible. The fact that Cloudhead basically deleted the tweet and came back with another tweet that said that we have all sorts of hardware that talk about a Freudian slip, hardware that isn't fit for public consumption, which basically says, yeah, we test hardware all the time from different people. One thing that we do know that kind of gives it a little more credence is all along Cloudhead has partnered very tightly with Valve. They were one of the first people to tweet images of the Knuckles controller, so they received probably maybe even the first developer outside of Valve themselves to get Knuckles controllers, as far as we know. So if this headset is being made by Valve and there are dev kits in the wild, you'd have to imagine that Cloudhead would be one of the first to get one, if not the first. So all of this kind of leads credence. It's still speculation because none of it is absolutely confirmed, but the dots are starting to be connected. Now, to be a little Debbie Downer, because I'm known to do that in my effort to be realist, we still don't have Knuckles. Cloudhead was showing Knuckles publicly, not hiding it in a tweet that they then deleted, but they were publicly showing Knuckles. I forgot to go back and look, but it's been over a year. So who's to say that, if that same timeline applies to Knuckles as to this headset when they're not even confirming that they have a Valve HMD dev kit, this kind of suggests that the dev kit or that the headset itself could be very, very, very far off, which isn't great news because we all want more HMDs. We want succession and evolution, but I'm not optimistic given how things have played out in the past that this headset is coming very soon. Yep.
Anyone else have anything to add about this?
Just on that point, Steve, I wonder, there could be a situation, because I agree, I think the Knuckles controllers, they've been out for they were sort of displaying early versions of these things a long time ago, sending them out to various developers, but I will say maybe they purposefully delayed them. They initially only had plans to do the Knuckles, and now they want to release them in conjunction with a headset. So that could potentially point towards this headset being released a little bit sooner. But if you look at them as completely separate products, I take your point, this headset would really be a long way off. I just wonder, maybe they did delay them and are not sending them out there or releasing them on their own. They want to release them in conjunction with this headset. I suppose that's the more optimistic way of looking at this. But it's either way. I think it's safe to say that they've got this headset. There's so many things that point to this. We saw these images a long time ago. And almost nobody really thought they were sort of fake images or anything like that. And I think the same goes for this. I think they do have it, and their response almost points to the fact that they had it as well.
Yeah, and also, or I was just going to mention, it was June 2017 that Cloudhead first showed off the Knuckles controller. So it's been a while. Wow.
Hey, my question: do you guys like the detectives of the Vive subreddit before it went to hell, right? They basically like came up with this picture, and then they came up with the Valve HMD, and they're like, yeah, look at the curve. There's the curve of the camera. Do you guys really buy into this detective work here, or do you think it's a dramatic stretch? Because I was talking about this yesterday, and I was joking about like, yeah, this is confirmed. It's confirmed. But I was actually really kind of joking. Like, I don't think this confirms anything. I would love to believe that this really is that Valve HMD, but I don't think like these little blurry, like, I don't think that confirmed. Like the guy made a little green line right there, and then he puts a green line there. And so in your mind, it's like, yeah, green plus green, that's got to be it. There's a blue line and there's a blue line. Yeah, this absolutely has to be it, right?
I don't think it confirms anything, but I think you shouldn't never underestimate the detective work of the internet.
Absolutely.
I mean, Cloudhead gave it credence by feeling the need to take the image away. And I'll also give a public response. Now, it could be that they just don't want to poke speculation, fuel the flames, but I don't know. Like, I think I think there's something there. This may not, I mean, maybe this is some other headset completely unrelated from the Valve headset, but I think there's something there when you feel the need to respond. Like if it was a, a weird angle on a Samsung Odyssey or a Pimax or something, they would have responded in their tweet and would have said, yeah, well, no, that's just a Pimax, dummies, and like showed the same angle or something. But they didn't. They come back with a tweet and said, hey, yeah, we do have unreleased and unfinished hardware not ready for the public yet around here. So it's confirming they have something in my mind. Like if it's not the Valve HMD, it's something else.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I was just going to say Paradise Decay said in the picture you can see the camera reports well, it matches. And I do agree with that. Personally, looking at it without all the doctoring of Reddit, you can kind of see the silhouette of a Vive HMD. But who knows, maybe there's other headsets that have that silhouette that don't exist too.
The other rumor that goes along with this is that supposedly like they're playing Portal VR because on the monitor there's like a font or something that is very Portal-esque, and they're like not only is this confirming the Valve HMD, but they're playing Portal VR. And I've always felt like of the three mystery Valve games, I think Portal is the most likely contender. So it all works out, all checks out.
Awesome. Portal VR confirmed launch title. I hope so. That would be really awesome. That Portal 1 and 2 I played. Those are like some of the only games I've ever finished. Like I loved those games. All right, the next news story. I don't know what the hell this is. Does someone know what's going on at the Vive subreddit?
I don't know too much.
All right, I'll jump in. Go ahead. I don't know too well either. I've kind of been busy over the weekend specifically. I missed the initial meltdown, but apparently our Vive, the Vive subreddit, has had a moderator that has gone on a power trip. I'm sure chat here can help us square this away because they probably have tracked it a little closer than I have. But basically, this little power trip has resulted in various developers being banned. I believe the Racket NX developers are banned, Onward developers banned. There's a sort of lockdown on all postings of images and GIFs and links. And I don't know if the rationale is that they're trying to, this moderator is trying to limit self-promotion too much or something to that effect. But basically, Chet Falisak on Twitter, the I guess former Valve employee, he kind of bashed this moderator. It's the user 500 is the moderator that's kind of guilty of all this. And so right now what's happening is if you go to the subreddit, you'll just see thread after thread after thread of people saying leave this subreddit, and people are starting up new subreddits. And the public, the community there, at least the ones that are commenting and making threads, are trying to influence a sort of mass exodus and to let our Vive die, because this moderator won't get off of their power trip and won't turn over moderation duties to someone else in the community. Last I looked, our Vive had over 100,000 subscribers, and it's a very busy community. So in a way, this is very sad, because even if everyone leaves in a mass exodus, it'll take a while for the snowball to build up steam on any sort of replacement subreddit. So I sub to all sorts of different VR-related subreddits, so I don't think I will feel the difference, and I'll just sub to whatever new ones are replaced. But when you have concentrated 150,000, however many there are in one place, it creates just more topics, more news, more discussion, and I hate to see that go away. But yeah, I just thought we'd bring it up here because it's interesting, and I would say our Vive is a big part of the VR community. It's still a small community as a whole, whether you're consuming this on YouTube or the audio podcast. Maybe you go to Reddit when you're at a PC or on your mobile phone, and that's a way you learn about things, and it just kind of sucks to see something like this happening over one person. It's like one person can really derail a community of 150,000 strong.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, if you go to the Vive subreddit right now,
I was just
every single post is just bonkers. But you know what? But one thing I'll say about it is there's nothing stopping anybody really from making like 40 fake Reddit accounts. And so if somebody has 40 fake Reddit accounts, they can wage war on a subreddit and make it look like a movement when it really isn't a movement. It could be like 5 or 6 really irritated people that are coordinating together, and they're like, let's bring this guy down, and then you have a couple pissed off developers as well that have been banned, and this guy probably has stepped out of his bounds. But I just want to remind people, like, there's nothing preventing you from creating like 40 fake Reddit accounts, and I'm sure people do that, so let's understand that as well. But for me, what sucks is, like, the first thing when I go to my computer, first thing in the morning, I go to the Vive subreddit. It's the first thing I go to, and I don't even own a Vive, but it's the first thing I go to because way back in April of 2016, I lived in the Vive subreddit for about 5 months. And that's just my routine. And so I go to the Vive subreddit, I see what's on it. And then I go to the Oculus subreddit, I go to the PSVR subreddit, I go to virtual reality, I go to some of the different ones, but I always start with the Vive subreddit. And if this crashes and burns, it's kind of like when NeoGAF has a major kerfuffle and then everybody goes to another website. And then so half of the community is gone and they never come back. Why do these things happen, guys? Why do these things happen?
I'm just looking at the front page of our Vive now, because Bloxyman said that thousands have unsubscribed already. This is real. It's not just a few people making a sort of extra accounts or anything like that. And I do agree with that. But the top story at the moment is 500 needs to step down. It's got 12,500 upvotes. I mean, that is ridiculous. And Flute Roger said in chat as well, earlier today it was 117,000 subscribers to our Vive, and now it's down to 115. And like the second news story on there, it says, dead sub, please relocate to the egomaniacal free mod free Vive sub or Vive _VR. I think people, I don't know, because I go onto these subreddits and I basically just get the news. I don't really interact even too much on these subreddits either, in all honesty. As much as I like to talk about VR and that kind of stuff, I just don't really interact. I've never been somebody who does interact that much on these kinds of things, but I think it's a valuable source for news and what people are discussing at that moment. I'm just scrolling down. This is just constant. It's all the way down to the bottom of the page now. It's all about 500. It's disturbing, and I agree, with what Anthony said there, because back in 2016, I was the same. I was going on to our Vive, and since then, I've stayed up on it. It's one of my rotation of subreddits that I go to. So it's a shame to see it end like this because of one person. And I just want to sort of say, I don't know the ins and outs of this. I don't know who's responsible. It seems like, as we've said before, there's no smoke without fire. And I don't know what to believe with all this because I've not followed it closely enough, but there seems to be something here, unfortunately.
Do you guys think, though, that because part of this is that you cannot self-promote, right? On the Vive subreddit, where there's other subreddits that you can kind of self-promote if you don't abuse it too much. But when you go to the Vive subreddit, you don't see all these pictures of everybody's YouTube videos. And that's kind of good in a way. Because you go to some of the other subreddits and all it is everybody like, look at me, everybody, I've got a video, look at me, and that kind of gets played out as well. And I don't know, there's no easy solution to it because honestly, you would like to have a subreddit where people can self-promote. There needs to be some kind of special system. I don't know how you figure this out because you don't want the subreddit to be nothing but people promoting YouTube videos, promoting websites, shilling for their own game. In terms of fake Reddit accounts, Kev Gret says anyone who fakes Reddit accounts normally get sniffed out pretty quickly. I don't know, man, because I'm telling you, there's plenty of developers out there. How many times have you guys seen a post where it's like, Zazaza game is really good, and it just so happens to time with the release of the game, and it just seems phony to me, and there's a lot of fake stuff out there. There's guerrilla marketing. It happens all the time. If I was a developer that was living and dying over how many sales I had and whether or not I'm eating tonight or not might depend on how many sales I got, I'd be tempted to create some fake accounts too and drum up some fake support. And there's no easy way to answer this. And so what they were doing before is they weren't allowing any of that. But then that pisses a lot of people off. And then a developer comes in and they just want to mention something about their game and then they get banned. There's no easy solution, man. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. The same thing happened to my R electric skateboarding subreddit. Some mod went berserk, and then everyone moved to R electric skateboards instead of skateboarding, and then it sorted itself out, and everyone went back. So I mean, let's just hope it'll sort itself out, and this person will step down or whatever. It usually ends up happening if there's enough backlash. So
I feel mixed on promotion. It can be abused. You don't want every person makes a video every day, you don't want them spamming their latest video daily, but there are times think of a game like Onward, and they want to announce because their community is basically that Reddit. That is their in a way their marketing arm, and you can say maybe they should or shouldn't, but that's a community approved and a community. They're positive within the community, and no one is mad because the developer of Onward comes in there and occasionally makes a post about an upcoming update or something. It's news. It's just coming straight from the developer, so it could be taken as self-promotion, and to a degree it is, but it's also news because Onward's not going to be covered on IGN, or the latest Onward update may or may not even be covered on places like Upload VR or Road to VR. So as a community, I think the community benefits from having a certain type of developer, and I'll sticking with the Onward example, that's a great type of developer that you want interacting and participating in the community, and shutting that down, it's a different tone to have that type of participation in a community than it would be of you know, a big game like Capcom coming in and spamming a bunch of Resident Evil 7 stuff. Like, that's different. I can't really list out why it's different, but and hopefully people understand what I'm saying, but it's just different. And it's almost like it's a community-made game in a way. And I think suppressing that, I think that's bad in any way.
We've just had a comment from Paranoid Android in chat. And they said, you know, I think they've summed it up pretty much. Solution is easy. Let people decide what content is worthy. That's exactly how Reddit works. And that is true. I mean, I will say that contrary to that, there is these subreddits that you go on and it's just constant self-promotion, spamming all the time. But if the community is big enough and I think mature enough, then these posts that are nonsense will just get downvoted and disappear very quickly. And that is
What about the fake accounts though that keep pumping them back up, man? I believe fake accounts happen. They really do. I know some people say fake accounts aren't as common. I think they're common. I see posts all the time that like they're talking about some game being great, and I know the game is awful, and it's got to be a fake. It's got to be a fake account.
Somebody did mention in chat as well, though, it is a lot of work because you've got to get some kind of reputation on Reddit to have any kind of standing. So there is that side of things as well. It's a lot of work to create a fake account and maintain that for weeks, really, in order to get a reasonable reputation. And the other thing, that the final thought from me really on this subject is, you know, I don't know the ins and outs of 500 and 500 as a user. I don't know what he's done. I've seen the changes on our Vive in terms of them not allowing any videos or promotion, self-promotion, that kind of stuff to be shown. What I will say is I think the most responsible thing for him or her to do is to just step down, because to save the community, I think that's either way, whether they're right or wrong, that's the thing that they need to do, just step down and let somebody take over.
Yeah, that'd solve all the problems. Then we'd be back to normal. But for now, I'm going to move over to the Vive _VR subreddit.
One last point about this. As soon as we start getting all these other headsets that aren't HTC, this subreddit's going to die anyways, because this subreddit is Vive and it's Vive because Vive has been the only Steam VR headset. But when we have, like, when Pimax is officially out there and anybody can just buy a Pimax, and then there's the Valve HMD, and then there's LG, you know, and then it's why are we going to the Vive subreddit? That's just one little headset. So maybe like Steam VR will start blowing up or something. And I know the Steam VR subreddit is saying, hey, come over to us, guys.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense anyway. Like, eventually, you know, HTC isn't going to be the big person anymore, hopefully. All right, I don't really know too much about this next little thing either. Is that, Steve, did you put that down? Do you want to talk about that really quick?
Yeah, so buried in the news, and I didn't see it till this morning, but you know, because of coming off of our previous story, because the Vive subreddit is just buried with calls for the moderator to step down. You may have missed two announcements. I hate to call them announcements; they're not necessarily announcements, but we know Subnautica Below Zero, the standalone DLC, is coming soon, and Unknown Worlds in the last couple of days confirmed what I was hoping to be not true, and that it will not have VR support initially, and maybe not at all. I forget their exact wording, but they said it's not going to have VR support, you know, in early access, and that they might, you know, look into getting it in there in the future. But then you also, around the same time, Codemasters, developers of Dirt Rally 2, have also announced no VR support in their game. And I thought that it was good to bring this up because, you know, both of these statements are within a couple days of each other, maybe even the same day. I don't know exactly when they were timed, but you have two games in Dirt Rally and in Subnautica that, you know, aren't perfect, but were really, really well received in general. Like, people that like Subnautica, myself included, love it. People that are really into Dirt Rally on PlayStation and on Oculus, and then a lot play it through Revive on their Vive through Steam VR. The people that like those games are really, really into them. And now to see the successors both come out and say, no, VR just isn't enough, that we're not dedicating these resources to it, we're not going to make it happen. It is a very big bummer, and it's a huge bummer, honestly, because one, you're looking forward to those games, but two, in a way, it kind of it pulls out the state of VR discussion of sorts, in that is the state of VR good if people that have made games with VR support have decided not to keep supporting it. It's different than a developer that's never made a VR game. It's different than Red Dead Redemption 2 not getting VR support because Rockstar or whatever haven't put it in any of their games yet, so to speak. So for a game that has been known to, in a way, for including VR support for the successor to not have VR support, I think that's just a bad piece of information, and it sucks.
Yeah, it sucks a lot.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about it is, like, these developers, so I know what they're doing here. What they're doing is they feel like if they officially support VR in some kind of way, then what happens is they might have all these headaches that come out of it, because then now they've got support issues, and they don't really have the time or the resources to spend on the whole VR thing. And so they're worried about that. Now, here's my solution to this. My solution to this is just have it buried in the options, experimental VR mode. Okay. Just bury it in the options and just be like, oh, well, we don't officially support VR, but there is, if you go into the options, there's an experimental VR mode. Then that way, the people that really want the VR and they'll deal with any jank that comes along with it, they can go into the options and they can activate the experimental VR mode. And then somebody else that's like, well, I can't figure this out. It's not working right. It's not working right. But it's an experimental VR mode. So you can't expect to go to the developer and get support for that. It's a little experimental thing. I think that's the answer to this problem, because Subnautica, it's Subnautica Below Zero, I got to imagine, is using the same game engine that regular Subnautica is using. So whatever they're doing for VR support right now, I got to imagine it's a couple lines of code that could work in Subnautica Below Zero. Now, there might be tons of jank with it, and you have Subnautica Below Zero, and then it gets all screwed up, or there's UI problems, there's all these little things. But if they had it as an experimental VR mode buried in the options, then you solve all the problems, right?
Well, I think it's probably a little more involved than that. I agree. I think they're using the same engine, because that's in part of what the Subnautica development was so long, is that they created their engine. There was a quote, I don't know if Carmack said it, but someone said, you can, as a developer, you can make an engine or you can make a game. You can't make both. Or you can't make both well, or something to that effect. And so, yeah, I'd have to really, really think that they're using the same engine, maybe with little tweaks and improvements. But I think they also said that their VR market for them was around 1% of all the people who bought Subnautica, which is much, much lower than I think the 10-ish% that we saw with Resident Evil 7. But when you think 1%, if 1% of your audience, it's hard to cater to 1%. It's hard unless your investment to cater to that 1% is 1% or less. It makes business sense to not cater to them, and that's the unfortunate realism to this news and this story, is that it's just 1%, and 1% is way too small.
Yeah, more people gotta get into Subnautica VR, get that up to 10%. I mean, it's free. It was free on Epic Games. You'd hope there'd be an influx of people trying it in VR. But yeah, back in October, the developer said right now VR is in, but slightly broken due to a number of code changes, and then we're hoping to get it working. But obviously, it looks like they didn't end up getting it working. But slightly broken is good enough in my opinion. But I get that it's really hard. Trying to make a VR game today, Jesus, this stuff's hard.
Or open it up to mod support and let the community fix it. There's enough nerds out there that will get the VR working if you just give them the ability.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing too.
You know what's weird though is like the Dirt Rally thing. You would think the hardest of the hardcore Dirt Rally nuts are playing it in VR, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're playing it like with a triple monitor setup, because Dirt Rally, like Codemasters, like they have a hardcore fan base, like the really hardcore, right? And maybe those guys aren't using VR. Maybe they've tried it in VR and there's some nice things about VR, but maybe they ultimately go back to like a triple monitor setup.
So one of my good friends, and this is purely anecdotal, but he works for a NASCAR team. He's a mechanical engineer. We've been friends forever, and he's really, really into racing, actual racing, but he also is big into iRacing. And iRacing has VR support, but when I go to his house, he's got a quad monitor set up to your point, and he's got another monitor on top. And this guy goes all out. His racing wheel alone is over $1,000. He's got like a real gear shifter, like he's probably got 20 grand into this setup. And I'm like, man, why aren't you doing VR? Like, it'll cut down on how big your rig and everything is, and it's the field of view. He can't, like, when he's looking forward, he needs to see that periphery when a car is edging up and trying to pass him. I don't think it translates the exact same way in Dirt Rally, but his answer to me as a major enthusiast down that sim road for racing was that the field of view was the problem.
The thing with Dirt Rally, though, they don't need motion controllers. I can understand there being a lot more effort in transferring Subnautica over to VR than it is for Dirt Rally. It's literally the HMD that you need. So I don't see there being as much of an effort. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a developer, and I'm prepared to be wrong about this, but it just feels like Dirt Rally would be sort of a no-brainer. They could, because whenever you use Unity or anything like that, you can export it as VR, and that's how you can export it. If you've got motion controllers and these extra things involved, then obviously it takes a lot of effort to get those working in the way that they need to work. But with Dirt Rally, it's literally just looking, and you can have the traditional control method. So I would think that Dirt Rally would be a simpler thing to convert to VR.
You need to spend more time in Subnautica. It doesn't have hand presence and motion controls.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes.
You're letting me down, Gary. You're letting me down.
Sorry, Steve.
I have to spend more time in Subnautica too. Damn, like I haven't. I did way back when it was janky and didn't even work. So like, gotta get back into that stuff. Hey, do you guys want to talk a little bit about Elite Dangerous? I'm kind of interested in this because, like, I played Elite Dangerous a while ago, a long time ago, kind of when I first got my Rift, and I loved that game, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I could do, and it's a really hard game to get into. So, like, I don't know, Steve or Gary, do you want to talk about Elite Dangerous a little bit?
Well, let's send it to Gary first.
Send it to Gary.
He's the more experienced one.
Yeah, but I'm not as experienced as Fleet Roger. He's going to be laughing at me here in chat. So, yeah, Elite Dangerous, because this is a game that, even before I got VR, this is the one game, because I knew it had VR support, and I didn't have a DK1 or a DK2 or anything like that. But this is one of the games that I always wanted to try. This was sort of my ambition. I knew this would be a fantastic game. I played it I picked it up probably a couple of months before I picked up VR, only because I knew I was going to play it. And from what I'd read, a lot of people were saying it's good to get to grips with the controls and stuff like that on a monitor, so you've got a reference, so you understand what you're going to be doing, because obviously in VR you can't see a reference guide or anything like that, a printout sheet of the controls in front of you necessarily quite so easily. So it's good to get an idea of the controls before you go into VR, and that's what I did. Now, Elite Dangerous for me, we've spoke about this before when Epic's 911 came on the show. He and I had a little bit of a conversation about Elite Dangerous, because it's just such an incredible game to me for VR. It's almost like the perfect game for what it is. It's the best realization of a game in VR for me. When I was a little kid playing Elite on my computer, or just using my imagination, being in a spaceship and just flying around the galaxy is something I always dreamed of, and having the ability to do it now, it blows me away. Every time I go into this game, it blows me away. This is an old game, you know, this is nothing new, and I know that we're a new show and we talk about all the latest games. Part of the reason we're bringing this up, Steve put it down on the list, and I think you want to say a few things about like the Pimax experience with this as well, which I think I'm really interested to hear how this works, because I can almost get away from the fact that I've not got a wide field of view in this game, because I sort of almost like I sort of resign that as the fact that I'm wearing some kind of helmet or something like that in this ship, so it doesn't make a big deal to my experience. But while I'm in there, a wider field of view must make this game absolutely incredible. So, Steve, because you've been playing this game for a while, what do you think of Elite Dangerous, comparing it from the older headsets, but also with the Pimax?
So, well, you know, it just sort of first, like, I did put it on the list because, like, it's such a hard game to give it justice. It's a hard game to even really talk about on the show, but I know it's an important game to the community. I know that a lot of people are just really, really into this game, and I haven't been able to cover it. I still can't cover it. You know, I put it on the list to talk about because, you know, just want to talk about it at some point. It's sort of been a blind spot for, I think, VR Roundtable. Like, we haven't talked about for the magnitude that this game has for the VR community and everything. I don't feel like we've covered it enough, but it's not because we don't want to or because I don't want to. I'll speak for myself, not necessarily for you, Gary. But it's because it's hard to talk about without being an expert. And it's hard to be an expert on this game because the learning curve would be like trying to run up a ski slope backwards. Like, it's just really steep and really hard to get over. But there's beauty in that. It's like almost anything rewarding in life that has a steep learning curve. Like, you know, I play guitar, and I know you do too, Gary. Like, initially when you're learning to play guitar, it almost seems impossible, but then it just clicks and it all comes together, and you're really it's just a really good feeling, a good sense of accomplishment. And for a game, Elite Dangerous has a similar kind of feeling. So I played it on the Rift for a few hours, 10 hours, something like that. But since I've got the Pimax, I've probably put another 10 hours in on it. And in the Pimax, it's more enjoyable for me. It's the type of game that I think that is perfect for the advantages of the Pimax, and less suited for the disadvantages of the Pimax, with the black levels notwithstanding. I find that the black levels are totally fine. Like, if I was to pull off one headset and put the other one on, immediately back and forth, I'm sure the Pimax the black levels would be a standout issue. But outside of that, because the sweet spot is so big on the Pimax, and because there's no God rays, and because the SDE and the resolution clarity is there, I'm really enjoying this game. Like, when you hyper jump, I don't know what the correct term, but when you use your FSD and you jump from one solar system to the next, and it does that Aurora Borealis type look above you, and it's making that sound, like, it is much better in the Pimax. And it's hard to really, like, I don't have any organized thoughts. Like, I'm guilty of never being organized and just rambling and when I talk about something. But VR Spry Guy brings up a point that I did want to say, and it's also why we put it down, is I think this week, somewhere around the current time frame, is the 4-year anniversary, I want to say, of Elite Dangerous, it being released. So there's a sale now. You can buy it on Humble for, I think, $15. You get the game, the Horizons DLC, and the Commander pack, whatever the hell that includes. I don't even know. Which brings me to a point, so I'm not just monologuing, Gary. I want to bounce it off of you. Talk about, like, one of the things, like, I'm assuming some people listening don't play Elite Dangerous, and they haven't felt the urge to jump in and try to get over the curve, so to speak. So you put some list of a few things out. Why don't you kind of talk about the game type, like what is it like to play Elite Dangerous? What does it mean? Like, what do you spend your time doing? Obviously flying a spacecraft, but what is the game? Like, can you talk about that?
Well, the point is, like, Elite Dangerous, it's not really a game that you play through from start to finish. This is just something that it's something you go into forever. You can just play this game forever. It's got no end, really. It's got no narrative. It's got a lot of lore that you can look into and get glimpses of that kind of stuff. But there's various ways to play this game. So you've got mining, bounty hunting, trading, exploration as well, which you can just go out into the vastness of space and, explore these planets, scan them, and then come back and get money for that. But you've also got various missions, transportation missions, assassination missions. And also, if you get the right ship, you can do passenger missions, just do sightseeing trips and stuff like this. There's a huge number of ways to play this game. And I've never really got into like mining or bounty hunting or anything like that. But you don't need to necessarily. You can play this game quite happily with focusing on one of those things and just play it that way if you want to do that. Now, just quickly, because on this list we've got down the Horizons DLC. So just quickly on that, I think anybody that picks up this game, I think it's important that you just pick up the Horizons DLC. It's really, it's not an expensive DLC to add on or anything like that. But it allows you to land on planets and have planetary vehicles, which is probably one of the main things with this game as well. And it also helps for exploration. The problem is that, like, I could explain this game to death to many of my friends and they still won't be interested in it. I think you've got to have a certain mindset to really want to get into this game. Now, I will say I don't blame anybody for not wanting to dive into this game. Elite Dangerous, it's a difficult game to get into initially, and it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't make it easy to get into. And honestly, you have to research a lot just by doing internet searches or YouTube video searches for tutorials, because it doesn't guide you through. And if there's something in there that you want to do, you don't necessarily know how to do it immediately. You need to look for a guide on the internet. It pushes you away. It constantly pushes you away, and yet I can't stop playing it. When I go in there, I'm all the time I'm thinking, why am I not playing this all the time? Because I'll have a break. I'll have a break for 2 months, and then I'll come back to it, and I think, why am I not in here all the time? Why am I not playing this game all the time? That's how it hits me. And
sounds like an abusive relationship.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. But that's where I am at the moment. I'm just telling Elite Dangerous that I love it. But yeah, really, I think.
So what is the Horizons DLC? So I just picked the Horizons DLC up this weekend, part of the sale. So if you have Elite Dangerous already, you can get the Horizon DLC for $7-ish on Humble also, and $15-ish for Elite Dangerous with the Horizons DLC and the Commander Pack. So I, as a person that is somewhat experienced with Elite, I would say I've really just kind of nipped away at the very beginning stages, even though I put 20-ish hours into it. As a person who doesn't know, what is the Horizons DLC? Because it's hard. I don't even know what I've been missing. Like, you've described it as something that you highly recommend. I don't even know what I'm missing. Like, it doesn't make itself obvious. It doesn't say, hey, you need Horizons DLC to go do this, or at least not that I've noticed. So what am I getting with the Horizons DLC?
It's basically planetary landings. So, I mean, that's the main thing. It does a number of things, but the main thing is planetary landings. So you can see a planet, and if you go onto the system map, you'll have certain planets highlighted in blue, and these are ones that you can then land on. So you can just select them as a target and then land on the planet. You need to purchase a planetary landing suite, and also you can get these vehicles, these planetary vehicles as well, that you can go out. And these it's really for exploration and that kind of stuff. So you can land on these planets and find, using the detailed surface scanner, you can find certain landmarks on planets, land next to them, go out in your vehicle, scan them, and get extra money and that kind of stuff. So the Horizons DLC, to sum it up, among other things, is primarily planetary landings, I would say.
Dougie in chat says 20 hours and is not even taken off yet. I'm assuming he's referring to just the initial learning how to launch and land your initial Sidewinder. So I will say, one of the things I want to touch on here is I want to describe how I got into Elite Dangerous and how I don't know if I'm over the curve, but I feel like I can play the game and I can hop around solar systems, and I can get missions, I can complete some some missions, so I guess I know it enough to at least get that far. And I'll say, like, for me, the first thing it is, I have a HOTAS, and I have a hard time imagining anyone playing this game without a HOTAS. HOTAS. So, like, I have a hard time imagining anyone playing the game without a HOTAS. So, like, check one, get a HOTAS. The second thing, Gary, when I got started, you recommended to me to play it flat, like on your monitor, so you can research things and kind of get your bearings. I did that. I went through all the training missions. And I went through, the training mission. The first one teaches you how to take off. I think the second one teaches you how to land. And then you get into basic mining training and some combat training. I did all of those flat without getting into VR. I also got some bindings for my HOTAS, I think from you, Gary, which I think is probably a common community binding, it seems like. It's pretty close. So you want to get all that stuff set up before you really even start thinking about VR. Once you get over that, then you're able to, in my mind, go into VR and experience it for the first time. And I'm also find that if I've had a big break from it, say 2 months or so without playing the game, I'll go back in and I'll redo the training missions, because a lot with what you're doing with your HOTAS and with the controls, it needs to become muscle memory to put down your landing gear or to go into your hyper jump. I don't know the correct term, but to do those things, you almost need to not overcritically think about, how do I do that? Like, it needs to be a little bit muscle memory with your fingers. I think once you get there, though, that this game is very, very rewarding. And I know I've said that earlier. It's just a top-notch game. And I'll describe it also. Like, this is just jump in if I'm wrong, Gary, but like from what I've seen of the game is you're doing these missions, which is really just has you flying a craft. Like, you fly a craft from point A to point B for the most part, and you do something, you do missions, you get credit, you become a trader, you upgrade your trader ranks and things like that, and then with this credits you buy more ships, and it's just kind of, and you outfit your ships with more gear and so forth. So it's sort of a like a grinding game where you're just your whole goal is just to get more crap, right? Like, I don't know if there's any other bigger goal, and then at some point, I guess, battles and shooting at other ships and stuff can become a focus if you want it to become that.
I think the important thing with this is, if you play this, if you go into this expecting it to just be a gamer's game, and you want to get the most money and that kind of stuff, and you just want to constantly grind and that kind of, you can play it that way. That's not the way most Elite Dangerous players will play this game. They'll get to a point where you want to get as much money to get the better ships and that kind of stuff, but you have to have, I think you just have to have some kind of fascination with this game, and just to explore the galaxy in that sense. I think this game, like, for me as a kid, you'd look up to the night sky and you see these stars, and if you just dismiss them as just stars and that kind of stuff, for me, I was always fascinated by it. I was always thinking, all of these stars out there, and this game enables you to travel around that galaxy in that capacity. It's not, if you want to play this game as a game and just be a gamer with this, a high score chaser, then you can do it. You can get the most money, you can get the best ships and that kind of stuff. For me, this game is not about that, but it's just got something more, which is why I think it just speaks to me personally on that level, and especially the fact that it's in VR. I think it's a great flat game anyway, but for a VR game, I think it's one of the best realized VR games.
Yeah, it's a sim. You feel like you're flying a craft. It's complicated enough to really give you a feeling of immersion and realism. You feel like you're legitimately making these maneuvers, but it's not so complicated as I'd imagine actually flying a spacecraft would be.
Yeah.
As hard as it is, it's got to be easier than really doing it. So yeah, I guess we can just sort of leave it at there. It's again, I'll just say it's an impossible game to truly cover, and there's most of the people talking about it in chat or have 500 hours, someone else saying 4,000 hours. Like, far more about this game than I probably ever will, but I still love it nevertheless.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really, if I ever have time to get back into it, I'd want to try out the multi-crew thing with one of you guys. That thing sounds so cool. You can have 2 people or 3 people in the same ship and you're all like flying together. I mean, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, just quickly on that point, because somebody did mention that as well with the Horizons DLC, you get the engineers update. I just wanted to sort of correct this, because it's not just planetary landings. The other things that you get are the engineers, so you can travel and visit these engineers, which will upgrade your ship beyond its normal means, and the multi-crew parts as well, so you can all be in the same ship. It's kind of like Star Trek bridge crew kind of experience, I suppose. But yeah, that's worth mentioning as well.
That's so cool. I gotta get a HOTAS now, I guess. Damn it.
Get that hot ass.
I have to. I love it. All right, well that's super interesting, because I remember I played that game for like 5-ish hours, maybe, at like a long time ago. That was a game I played on like the dev kit too, and then I got to my CV1. I'm like, oh, I missed the black levels of the dev kit too. That was like I remember that very clearly. So it'll be
God rays. The God rays
in.
on the CV1, God rays are just atrocious.
Honestly, the dev kit 2 is probably better for this game, but I'm excited. I should try it on I've never tried it on the Odyssey Plus, so I think that would be cool for me to do. That's awesome. Okay. I guess we can get on to some other games that we played this week. The first of which being A Fisherman's Tale. And I think we all played this. This one is a really unique, interesting game. It's a puzzle adventure game that kind of plays with physics. And I didn't know any of this jumping into it. I thought this was a story-based game or something. And then I found out it was puzzles, and it's really fun. You're kind of the fisherman at a lighthouse, and like the overall mission is to like turn on the light in the lighthouse, at least at the beginning of the game. I don't know if it changes throughout it. I've played probably half hour, 45 minutes of it, and I really enjoyed my time with it. Thought it's just a really unique, fun game to play. So I don't know, Steve, do you want to talk a bit more about A Fisherman's Tale?
Sure. I really like this game, y'all. Like, I don't know exactly how to say why I like it. Like, at its core, it's really just a puzzle, escape the room. Like you're trying to escape a specific scenario, and in some cases it's a room in this lighthouse abode. But it's more than a escape the room game in its presentation. The big obvious mechanic, and it's what gives it this creativity, is that it's like a Russian nesting doll. Like, you are in this room, you start out and you're in this room, and on the table is a model of the building that you're in, that your character, the fisherman, has created. And at some point, and I'm only showing the trailer because I don't want to give any spoilers or any clues away, but sort of the selling point of this game, and this is well known, so it's inherently a spoiler, but it's the only thing I'll say, is that at some point you're able to open up the model of your house that you've built, and you're able to look in and you see you miniaturized. And if you look up, you see you giant sized. I don't know if that's a word. Like, so you have this triplality. I don't know. Like you at all times, if you look up, you see exactly what you're doing as a giant, and if you look down, you see exactly what you're doing as a little miniature figure. And that parlays into the puzzles. Like, you'll have to pass items from the miniature world to the what I'll call the neutral world, and then up to the giant world, and back and forth in order to solve these puzzles. And I think that gives it a very clever take. Like, it's unique. Like, this is one of the things that VR was meant to do. Is this would not work at all in any way as a flat game. I don't think it wouldn't be anywhere near as cool. So this game is $12, and it's not very long. I haven't completed it because I'm doing the savor the flavor thing. You know, I'm on the third act, I think. There's multiple chapters or acts or whatever they call them. So, like, I'm not trying to just bang it out, bang, bang, bang. So I've done about an act a day, give or take. And for $12, it's currently, I think it's 15 is its normal price. It's currently on sale for $12, 12 something. This is a no-brainer. Like, I fully recommend this for the price. Like, it's got more content in terms of length than Ace Combat 7 does at 1/5 of the price, and it's good quality content as well. So this is probably my favorite Escape the Room puzzle. If we're going to put it in that category, it's my favorite one, and it's also sort of in the experience category. This is a game; you're solving puzzles, but I almost put it in the experience category. Like there's certain times when it's usually experiences. It's things like Crow the Legend or Alumet that I'll want to call my wife up and say, try this in VR because I know you'll love it. This is in that, it's a game, but it's also in that mode where I want my wife to try it just as an experience, not as a game. And I hope that makes sense the way I'm saying that. But it was one of those few moments where I want to show this to people. It's almost like a demo opportunity because it's just a real clever mechanic, and it feels real nice and graphically. I think the game by default is super sampling really heavy. Like when I went into it, and yes, I'm playing it in the Pimax, it would like shut down my graphics card. It was like razor sharp, and like halfway through, I would just get a black screen. It would shut down my Pimax. I'd look up at my computer, my monitors are being wonky. I had to really undersample this on the Pimax, like lower than I've ran any other game, and even at a very undersampled resolution, it's still crystal, like tack sharp. So I don't know, maybe it's just a bug in rendering it to the Pimax or something, but it is a good looking game, and I have nothing but praise for it. This one really pleased me.
Yeah, what do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, well, one of the things, even if this, it's on sale right now for $12.74 to like a certain time, so it's just under $13, right? But even if this was like $15 right now, and that's going to be its normal price, you can't put all $15 games into the same basket, because we've got so many indie games that are out there that they're bare bones. They don't have the production quality. You go into the menu and it's kind of weird. You go over here, something's glitchy. One of your eyes is like it doesn't have the focus right, and then it comes into focus, and then the sound effects are a little bit off. What I'm trying to say here is that there are quality productions out there, and then there's a lot of indie stuff. There's some indie stuff that is pretty quality, and then there's like indie stuff that is pretty crappy. And the thing about A Fisherman's Tale, this is a high quality production. We're talking about music, sound effects, voiceover work, the entire production. So yeah, it's $15, and yeah, it's less than 2 hours in total time if you play it. I'm doing the same thing Steve is doing, by the way. It's like savor it, It's like you get a package of Now and Later. This is like my, like you get a thing of Starburst, right? Does anybody get Starburst and you just eat it all in 5 minutes? That's the wrong way to do it, man. You get a Starburst, you get that pineapple Starburst, you want to suck it for a couple of minutes, and then you wait about 15 minutes, and then you take another piece. But I'll buy it for my son. 5 minutes later, he ate the whole thing. I'm like, dude, that's not how you eat Starburst. And so when I have a shorter experience like this, yeah, why not savor it? Don't just run through it. And so many people get these things and they're like hypersensitive of this only took me 58 minutes. It's 58 minutes and it costs $13 and I want a refund, goddammit. And it's like, come on, man, it's a shorter experience, savor it. But in terms of what Steve was also talking about here is it's kind of experiential. It's a trippy thing because we've seen VR games that play with perspective. We've seen VR games where you're like a really big thing and then everything's small down there. We've also seen VR games where you're made to be the size of an ant and you're in this ant world. For example, Alice VR kind of plays with both of those back and forth a little bit. Not a very good game. There's an example of an indie game that doesn't have everything dialed in, doesn't have all the sound effects and production values dialed in. But this game plays with the sense of scale in both directions. And Steve was, there's more than just 3 levels. You look up, you see the ladder, it keeps going up. It fades out after about five realities or whatever. But yeah, you're in this game and you're manipulating things and you're like, whoa, this is so cool. Like, because in the beginning, you don't even realize that there's a big version of you that is doing all this stuff. It isn't until later that you realize that. You see the model and you see that there's a small version of you. At first, you don't know that the small version of you is mimicking every move that you ever make. And it's basically you. That's a reflection of you. There's you. Then there's the big version of you. And they play the puzzles. Like, we're not going to get into spoilers and stuff, but the puzzles play with that. They play with all those ideas. And so sometimes you have to take a little thing that is in the little model world and you drop it outside of the model world, and then it drops into your reality. And now it's the right size for you. And now you can do something with it. Or you got to have the big guy throw something in, and then it drops into your world. And now it's huge size, but you need it to be huge size to get the right thing out of there as far as the puzzles go. I've been very impressed with this. I'm stuck right now. I'm actually stuck in the third level. Like, there's something that you do with a boat, and I'm basically stuck at that part. But I'm not I'm not going to like jump on the internet and try to find like some guide or something. I'm just going to keep banging my way at it. So I'm going to go back in there again and see if I can try to figure it out. The one, if there's anything negative I would say about this game, it's a negative with a lot of these kinds of games, where I will say that there's an arbitrary thing that maybe that you have to do. There's some arbitrary thing that you have to do where until you do that, it doesn't unlock where you need to go. And so an example of this, I'm going to try to do it without doing a spoiler. An example of this is, say, you're trying to teleport around. And let's say you're trying to teleport out of this little room that you're in. Okay. And you know where you want to go and you want to teleport out of this room. But until you flick this lever or you open up this other thing, it doesn't unlock you. So you cannot teleport out of that room. So it's basically like you have to do some kind of a little arbitrary thing. And so sometimes you'll be stuck on that for a really long time and you'll be like, wow, that was really arbitrary. And so for 45 minutes, I was stuck because I got to flick the little lever. You know, I flick the little lever and then it unlocks that little. I can't. It's hard to explain it, but I think
just
you guys
refer to that as the Wilson's heart effect. Like that issue you're describing is the Wilson. Wilson's heart was the worst at that. I still like that game, but I haven't had the Wilson's heart effect yet in Fisherman's Tale. It seems a little more play tested than Wilson's heart was. I'm not saying it's not there. I personally haven't seen it, and I think we're at the same place. I think based on what you said, but no spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem with these games. Like, this is one of the inherent problems of these games. But it doesn't ruin the game. I'm just saying that is a negative aspect of it. But I still, like, I never thought I would be into these escape the room games, and I guess technically this one does qualify, and it works so well.
That's what VR does. I'm not going to jump on that too long, but like, I'm playing games I never would have played flat. Like, I would have had no interest in Elite Dangerous without VR. I would have no interest in a game like this without VR. And that's what VR is doing well. You can tell when something is executed right, when you're changing your taste, so to speak, because of the medium and the technology delivery.
Yeah, I would have never played this game. I love this game, though. Damn. Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I can just agree with what everybody else has said. Just a couple of points to make. I think because the puzzles is based around this one mechanic, as we've already mentioned. You know, you've got the large scale and then the smaller scale, and the puzzles majority of the puzzles are based around that mechanic, and it works so well. I think every time you solve a puzzle, it seems so simple. And yet when you're trying to solve it, sometimes you just think, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? And then you realize, you know, it just suddenly pops into your head. This is what I'm supposed to do. And that's it. It's not a difficult game. It's pretty simple, really. Nothing's going to tax you for too long if you just wander around, and you'll get to a point where you won't really get stuck, I don't think, for too long as you wander around and get it done. The other thing that I think was quite clever about this game is I think the narrative is based in a weird way, and maybe I'm reading something into the narrative, I'm not going to give any spoilers away about the story at the end or anything like that, but it feels a little bit like the mechanic of the puzzles also has a place in the narrative and where the story ends up. It's quite well done, and I hope I'm reading the story in the right way, because I think it's very impressive where they went with the story at the end. So yeah, the final thing, and I agree with everybody else. It's a fantastic game, definitely worth picking up with the for the price. No brainer. Yeah, absolutely, you should pick this game up for the price. The only thing is there were some issues with the physics, and somebody mentioned this. I think Kev Gret mentioned this in the chat earlier, and I did have a few issues with the physics as well. So it uses a teleport locomotion. But it also has this option where you can sort of extend your hand out to pick up certain things that are out of reach. You press a button, your hand will extend out, and then you can press the button again and bring it back to reach out for things. The problem with that is if you reach out, pick up something, and then teleport somewhere else and your hand ends up in the wall, the object that you've picked up can sometimes become stuck in the wall or stuck on some kind of geometry, and you can't get it out. So I actually had to restart a section a couple of times because I ran into this problem, which it is a problem, and it's a flaw of the game. There is no getting around it. I think it simply is a flaw of the game. But other than that, not a lot to criticize about this. I think it's so well done. The puzzles are really, really clever, and they make you, I think it's an easy game to appreciate because they are so clever that you think, you know, oh wow, every time you solve a puzzle you think, wow, that's really good what they've done there. You know, it's a satisfying little thing.
Yeah, and I think just final thought on this game is I like that even when I'm stuck on a puzzle, you know, in most games, if I'm stuck on a puzzle, I'm going to look it up right away. On this one, I just want to stay in the world and take my time. And I think that speaks a lot to like the world that they made and how fun the game is to play. So that's a big recommend from VR Roundtable.
Yeah, they have a hint system. I don't know if you guys left that turned on or off. I left it turned on. And the nice thing about the hint system is the hints don't immediately come on. Like it realizes that you're taking a long time. You're not solving it. And then when they give you the hint, you know, it's kind of a little basic hint and it'll likely get you back on track. And it's just a clever idea. It's like all built into the story. It all works into the story very well.
Yeah. So I think that's a great game. Next and final game we're going to talk about today is Spuds Unearthed. And I played a little bit of this game. I honestly don't know how to describe it too much. It's you're basically a giant in this game, and you're controlling all these different like military guys, and you're sticking them in like a plane, and then you're shooting them over to the enemy side, and you're basically just trying to defeat the enemy fortress in any way you can. You know, it has that brass tactics feel of this, tiny world in front of you, and you're kind of controlling it. And it also has a lot of systems to it. Like just in the limited time I played with it, you know, after a battle, you go back to your home base, and you have like all these different tokens to make different units and like customize your loadout in any way you want. And it actually looks kind of it's really confusing to me, but I think this game has a lot of potential. And for an early access game, I was pretty impressed. But I'll pass it off to someone else. Anthony, do you want to talk about it first?
Yeah, so I wasn't excited about this game. You know, I heard about Spuds Unearthed. They did pretty good job like promoting this game and advertising this game. So I heard about it. I knew it was coming out. And in this month of January, we don't exactly have like the biggest bangers coming out in this month. We got Ace Combat 7, Fisherman's Tale, Tabletop Gods. I mean, there, you know, some good games, but not like really huge monster games. And so a game like Spuds Unearthed, that's out there as well. And going into the game, I knew you guys were going to be talking about it, so I wanted to go in and take a look at it. And I was actually mildly impressed with what they got going on here from a standpoint. You know how I talk about these indie games, and there's so many of them, and some of them just don't have the production value. This one actually has pretty good production value. There's stuff going on in here where I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty nice the way they did this, the menus and like the little systems that they got going on. Now, the actual core gameplay, though, what I got into, basically what I was doing is I had these two gun turrets pretty much that, you know, you'd hold it in two hands and you're like this. And it's almost like a beachfront battle with like all these guys are coming and you're shooting them. And then you go over to this other turret and you're shooting them. And then you have these little guys that you can kind of throw out there as grenades and they parachute down in and they're fighting. And it was pretty enjoyable, but I got the feeling it was similar to Marvel Powers United, where it's like, it just goes on too long. It's just taking too long, you know? And so I'm like shooting these little guys and I'm like, man, it's really hard to aim this and get it where I'm actually shooting these little guys. I'm shooting my own guys as much as I'm shooting them. And then I finally started to realize that if you see where your shots are going, and you want your shots to hit the ground like 5 feet before the enemies are coming, and then you just kind of stay there and you're like turning this thing to shoot your machine guns, and then the guys will walk into it and you'll shoot them, and then they have these big guys and you'll shoot them. It's okay, but there's a lot going on in this game. I don't know what to say about it. It's conflicting to me because there's good aspects of it. It's better than I thought it was. I'll say that much. But at the same time, I don't know that the core gameplay loop is ever gonna work for me.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve?
I think something is wrong on when I tried to play this game because, you know, I didn't get a tutorial. I didn't get anything. Like, it was just like, put me there and there were these creatures coming at me and I had no context. I didn't have any awareness of what I was supposed to do, and my hands were backwards. So like, as I was holding the Vive controllers, the hands would be pointing the other way. So I was trying to hold the controllers the other way to orient them correctly. So I don't know if that was a bug, because I assume you guys are all playing it on the Rift. I don't know if you use your Odyssey, Chris, or not. But so I had that problem, but, you know, I don't know if, you know, because we have our press account thing, that if I was resuming from one of your all's matches or something, because Steam will try to cloud save your save file. So I think I might have picked up one of your all's games with no context, and I didn't know how to like start from the beginning. Like, it was just put me in this place. So the only thing I'll say is that it seems to be, from that, it seems to be a deep game. Like, there's lots of things going on. If you want to learn the system, you know, it might be rewarding in that way. Production values and everything is pretty good, I think, as Anthony mentioned. And then it also has this sort of, you know, a comic cartoony, like with the little spuds and such, so it gives it a little bit of a Ratchet and Clank or something type charm to it. So I think this has potential to be good, and it very well may be very good, but I haven't been able to get into it and properly assess it because of how it started me out. So maybe we'll talk about it in the future, and I'll be able to give my a better earned perspective.
Yeah. What do you think, Gary? You're muted. Is his mic broken? I don't know.
Sorry, I think I was just ignoring you, Chris. Yeah, sorry. No, I didn't get to try this one, unfortunately. But there was Paradise K in chat did say you have to hold a button for an overview of the basic tutorial in this. So maybe that's something to.
Yeah,
I did that, and I forget which button it was, but yeah, you hold a button, and then over each item, it sort of tells you what to do. But I feel like I was still missing something that brought it all together. Like,
yeah. For me, that's like, I think the number one thing they should focus on is, you know, making some sort of tutorial, because it seems like they just didn't have time, and like they released it too soon to have a tutorial. And I think that's should be like first priority on their list to get more people to play this game, because like, you know, I too was super confused right away, and I think I started to get the hang of it a little bit. But, you know, just pressing a button and seeing text everywhere is kind of not the best experience. But I think this developers doing everything right in terms of an early access game that seems like it's good enough, like it's playable enough that some people would want to buy it now. But and also, they laid out like a roadmap for where they're going with the game. So I think in terms of that, like I think this is a good early access game to buy into if you like the concept and it looks cool to you. But if not, I think it'll get there. It seems like they're going in the right direction. I think a lot of the problems I have are just that it's a little bit too early for me. So I guess with that being said, anything else you wanted to mention, or is that it?
I thought it was a multiplayer game, but I didn't notice anything multiplayer about it when I was in there.
Yeah, it says it is, which is weird because I didn't see that either. It must be somewhere. I don't know how that works. I guess we'll have to play more of that. I'll try to play more of that, and maybe we can give an update a little bit later on that game, because there's a lot to unpack in that game, a lot of different systems, which is cool. Some people like that kind of thing. All right, so that was episode 110 of VR Roundtable. We always appreciate it. All the super chats today, that was awesome. Leave a like if you enjoyed the episode. That helps us out a lot. And leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the podcast if you enjoyed it. That also helps a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next week for the next episode of VR Roundtable. Bye, everyone.
Bye.